I'm Stephanie Peat. I'm Director of Digital and Telecoms Policy at the States of Jersey, which means that me and my team look at a whole range of digital policies, and importantly included among those is cyber security. So I suppose the reason I'm here is because I'm leading on the development of a new island-wide cyber security strategy for Jersey. It's not published yet, it's going to be published very imminently. I might be able to give a few little spoilers today, but I don't want to, give too much away in case you won't read the whole thing. But we're working very closely with the States of Jersey Police, with the Jersey Financial Services Commission, with Digital Jersey, with the Information Commissioner. Some of you may have been in here for the data protection talk earlier, and also with various businesses and the CNI across Jersey.
Thank you. Teo.
Yeah, hi, my name is Teo Peltoniemi. I'm from KPMG, where I'm heading up IT cyber consulting here in Channel Islands. I'm originally from KPMG Finland, and I guess I'm here to give some insight what I've seen in Finland and other Nordic countries in the area of cyber.
Okay, I'm Matt Palmer. I'm Chief Information Security Officer for Willis Towers Watson. Willis Towers Watson is one of those big companies that you've never heard of. It's insurance, risk management, analytics and data. I've been there for the last couple of years, which means that one of the reasons that I'm here today to talk about the threat and opportunity aspect from a business perspective, particularly relevant because for my company as a supplier of risk management services, as well as a company that is attacked millions of times a month. It is very much both. I do have a second hat as chairman of the Channel Islands Information Security Forum, which was set up a few years ago to advance and bring together cyber security in Jersey as well.
My name's Andy Carpenter. My background's digital forensics. I was originally working for a UK police force. I've come on board with the States of Jersey Police for the Sincere project, and the purpose of the Sincere project is to get cooperation between the Crown-dependent islands of Jersey, Gibraltar, Guernsey and Isle of Man, and with the aim is to improve cybersecurity across the island and see how different islands practice their cybersecurity. The main aim is to be proactive about cybercrime prevention, as opposed to my background, which is originally post-incident. So I'm here to learn really what the companies over here have been doing and how we can improve cybersecurity for the public sector.
Thanks. Thank you very much, everyone. So for me, one of the reasons I'm pleased we've got this panel is because of the coverage that we've got. Stephanie, who can tell us about what the States of Jersey are doing to protect the island and how to enhance our security. Teo can talk to us about what we need to do to be a leader from a security point of view compared to other locations. Matt comes to us with his, what I refer to as your day job as a CISO, as to what companies can do to up their game in security. And Andy is around what are we doing as an island to protect ourselves and working with the other islands as part of the Sincere project, but also what can we do as islanders to increase our security awareness. So I think we've got a great range of skills here. As I am the chairman moderator here, I'm going to ask the first question before we put it out to the floor. And what I'd like to discuss is is actually a personal concern of mine. We saw as a result of what people know as the Panama incident, where there was a data leak from Mossack Fonseca, and that hasn't done Panama any good at all from a reputation point of view. If Jersey were to have a data leak that was high profile, it really wouldn't do the island's reputation any good either, especially for a jurisdiction like ours where we've built our reputation based on trust. What I'd like to discuss is what can we do to enhance, to minimise the risk of having such an issue happening in Jersey. So, Stephanie is looking at me, so I'm thinking that she's going to say it.
I think everyone will
You-
have something to say about this.
Yes.
Firstly, I think you're absolutely right. We are a small jurisdiction. If something like Panama Papers happens here, it may very well be the Jersey Papers as opposed to any particular one organisation that was involved. So yes, reputationally, we in government, we're really aware of that and really conscious of it, and it's one of the drivers for getting this new strategy out. And the other thing I would say is it's not just about putting in place technical controls. We need to do a number of things. We need to have a response capability. But I'd say even more than that, it's about, and the others may or may not agree, we cannot protect against everything. So we need to know how we're going to respond if and when something goes wrong. And part of that, and the other strong thing that we need to be talking about is not just about the technical prevention, but the human factor. By far the greatest source of things that go wrong is to do with people making mistakes or doing, and so training is key to that. So there's a number of things that I think we as an island need to be doing, some of which are driven by government, some of which are driven by private sector, and I think we need to work together on that.
Andy, can you...
Yeah, I think Steph definitely hit on it there with the human factor. The Sincere project isn't just about business and cybersecurity, it's about the population of the island. If we can educate people on just the basics, a lot of people take it for granted. Things like if someone found a memory stick on the floor and they didn't know who it belonged to, a lot of people are going to put it into their PCs to see, oh, I wonder who this is going to belong to. It's just natural human behaviour. We've got to educate people on just silly, simple things like that, or even simple things like, what is your password? How do you create your password? What's the structure to it? It's about educating that the weakest link is the human interaction part of it. So we, as an island, have to really educate that it's not just business, as I say, it's the individuals, it's the people who, the silver surfers even as well, as you might say. It's the whole cross-section of society on the island we need to educate.
This is actually a question of mine I was going to put forward later, but how do we educate people?
So we have to look at what methods people are using to try and protect themselves, and how are they accessing the internet these days. I know, going back to the Silver Surfer side of things, you've got a lot of people these days with tablets as opposed to PCs because they're a lot easier to use. So if they are out there and they're using their tablets, we need to look at things like app creation for that generation. We need to put very basic things like advertisements in the newspaper, just sort of weekly updates on if you are receiving spam emails from these web addresses, beware. Put out the message of, it's about prevention, beware of these tactics that are being used by fraudsters to try and protect yourself. And going back to the example of the memory stick, just explaining to them, if you do find something that appears to be, that you might consider plugging into your computer, hand it into your local police station. Don't just plug it into your PC. It's just education, really.
So if I can just be a bit pushy on that,
Yeah.
Who's going to do that and when?
Well, so my role isn't specifically to do that. My role is to coordinate all the islands doing it, because we need to get the message. Some islands are doing, their methods are better than others. So what we're trying to do is learn from each of the islands which is the best method of getting the message across. And the project only started up in March this year, and it's running till the end of next year and may continue after that. But what we've had to do is make an assessment of which methods are working on the various islands, and how can we implement those standards on other islands. The project reaches beyond those islands because Europe has actually funded this project, and with it comes the backing of a number of local enforcement agencies over their law enforcement agencies. So we're learning from them as well. So really it's about finding the best method that we can have to get the message across, and it may be that the JEP can assist with that. It may be that the internet service providers like JT, sure, they can assist with that. But we're making those connections. We have been having meetings with these people to try and ascertain how best can they assist with getting the message across.
Okay, thanks.
I can add a little bit to that if you want, but what might be coming out in the strategy in future. Education is the core point of it, and I don't mind talking too much, and we may come back to this, but there's a role for government to encourage this and to stick and carrot there and getting firms to educate people. There's a role for every business here. We in the States have to educate everyone in the States, as an organisation. There's a role for schools. The police have recently signed up to Get Safe Online, and a Jersey version of that. There's not one solution, there's a whole range of them.
Okay, thanks. If we just switch back to the original Panama subject and about data leakage. Matt, I'm trying to get your eye contact here. Sorry about that, mate. We, you know, that came from a company. What can companies do, organisations do, to reduce the risk of data leakage?
So you want to stop data leaving your organisation? That's really, really easy. Any company can stop data leaving its organisation, close the doors, shut up shop, go home. No data will go out, I guarantee it. It's even better if no information comes in. Problem is it kind of ruins your business with that model, so it doesn't work. I think what's unique about law firms and that type of business is they have a large amount of very unstructured data. Things that aren't sat in a central database that are very easy to control, and therefore they have to look at them a little differently. So if you're a big bank, you have, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a really whole big complicated problem, but effectively you can say, this is my data, this is the process it follows, these are the processes that people use, you've got loads of resources, you can structure everything, you want to have an army of process consultants, you can have them, an army of cybersecurity people, you can have them, because you're a big bank with a $1 billion budget. If you're a company with sort of 200 to 500 employees, which is sort of a large Jersey organisation, if you're more of a professional services company, you have very unstructured data assets and you don't have those sorts of budgets, you need to find intelligent ways to do it. And it's difficult to find intelligent ways to do it because a lot of the solutions out there are designed for giant companies like mine. Really useful for me, much harder if you're small. So how do you do that? Well, simplification is the key, really. So the simpler you operate, the better. Education is important, but it's never going to be enough. You can educate everybody, but somebody will still decide not to listen. Anyone who's ever been a teacher or a parent knows that perfectly well. So it won't guarantee. What you can do is you can incentivize, you can encourage, and you can deal with incidents effectively when they occur. One of the biggest ways to make sure that your employees do not do silly things is to make sure they know what happens when they do. We do tend to have, I think, a lack of consequences sometimes. And that goes to the root problem beneath all of this, which is we're trying to build trust, and trust requires honesty. And we don't have enough honesty in cybersecurity. Honesty involves accepting that our companies will have incidents. Honesty involves accepting that we will make mistakes. Honesty involves owning up when incidents occur and being prepared to actually report, share and learn from incidents when they happen. It means being prepared to follow through and make sure that if people act in an inappropriate way, then there are consequences for that, even if that damages your reputation. And sometimes all of that is extremely difficult to do. Companies are going to go so far with this, they're going to go and try and put some practical measures in place, but if we want to deal with that, we need to deal with the root cause, we need to deal with the culture, we need to deal with the honesty issue. We need to make sure everybody's prepared to own up when incidents do occur and then learn from them. Because one thing I can tell you is for every Panama Papers that we see, there are 100 more potential Panama Papers that do or don't happen, and we do not see or have visibility of those. So that's the first thing that we need to fix. If we fix that, we change the perceptions, we change the board views, we change the public sector views, and we show people just how widespread this problem really is. Once you've done that, then I think companies will be prepared to put the resources behind it, to put the controls in place that they need. Those controls are difficult, they're complicated, and they're not easy. It would be a fallacy to say there are one or two things that they can do to control this stuff. The truth is, there are hundreds of small things that companies need to do to control this stuff, but it starts with the culture.
Taylor, you're, part of your role, you're in and out of a lot of companies, advising them, auditing them as well. Do you have a view there?
Yeah, I think what Matt just said, I mean, we have to be honest, if somebody wants to hack you really much, that they eventually will succeed. So I think everything goes down to retaining that trust after this kind of incident. And at least based on the evidence we've gathered in various surveys and research we've done quite recently even, you actually can retain the trust after the breach if you've actually taken adequate measures, if you can show to your clients, to your customers that you've taken adequate measures to protect the data, and then you inform everybody who's involved in timely manner and do stuff like that, most likely they will not change the service provider in that case. So So it's kind of just impossible to have 100% protection. So you have to admit that it's possible that somebody will hack you, and it's just a matter of how to respond to that incident.
If I can add to that, Tom, I think a lot of companies still look at security as something that's absolute, something that you stop, something that is a certainty, either you are secure or you are not, and therefore they focus very much on preventing incidents from taking place. And don't get me wrong, that's really important. It's absolutely the first thing that you should do. But when you have an incident, people aren't going to be asking you how well you can prevent an incident from taking place, because you've just demonstrated that you can't. Instead, they're going to be asking you, how do you know when incidents take place? How do you protect your business after they take place? How well have you managed this afterwards? Have you protected my data? Did I get a message from you saying my data's been compromised, supported by appropriate support or credit monitoring or whatever else that company decides to put in place? Or did I read it in the press and then spend the next couple of weeks trying to file requests with the Information Commissioner to work out what's going on? Where's the information coming through from?
Breach. But I think there were 2 years before they talked to their customers and that.
And I think a really interesting thing is you don't hear about the companies who do that well, because they're not the ones plastered over the headlines who are losing their customers. You hear about the companies like TalkTalk and Yahoo who didn't do it well at all.
Yeah. But luckily, at least in Finland and European Union countries, the laws are changing. So you get data protection regulation. I guess the last panel was about that, and that actually that increases the reporting responsibilities for firms to actually come out with this kind of breaches. And then you've got the cybersecurity directive as well, that has also impact to reporting responsibilities.
Okay. Thank you. We'd like to take a question from the floor. Would anyone
I just tweeted it. What about the depth of user ID and password? Why are we still using user ID and password? Why aren't we moving away from that or encouraging?
I think it's become so ingrained into computer usage where there needs to be an alternative solution that's prepared, that's financially viable, can be distributed as quickly as possible. I know a lot of sort of the cybersecurity forums I'm on, there's a two-tier security system of an email, password, and then with your mobile phone, everyone's got a mobile phone these days, you receive a token via SMS as a third, another stage of login. So it is evolving from the original username and password, but it's not evolving quickly enough.
So I understand, but I think that there has to me, that's something that we should be pushing toward for. I don't know if you're aware of the Intersea solution. More than happy to introduce you to them, which is really about the depth of the password. Yes, it's using PKI. I think that 20 years ago, we would have been like, I'm never going to put my credit card into the web.
Yeah.
Because we needed to go get a thing, we'd go to the store and get it.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the education that we expect to see, and we are very well placed as an island to really revolutionize and also to make sure that the organization can work with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, sorry, Stephanie, the policy, I know you can't reveal the whole thing. Does it go into that type of depth?
No, the strategy doesn't go in, it's a government strategy, it doesn't go into loads of technical solutions. I think we're probably not the best people to do technical solutions. There are better people on this panel and in the audience to do technical stuff. What it does is it sets out the priorities for government, it sets out what our goals are and the number of ways that we will achieve them. And so it doesn't go deep down into details, but it does talk more broadly about some steps we can take with our education, some steps we can take about improving information sharing, which I entirely agree with Matt is a very crucial point. Interestingly, when you ask CEOs, there's a nice survey about this, how many people think we need to share information better. A large proportion of them say yes, absolutely, it's essential. You ask them again if they're prepared to share their information, and they say, oh, not me. Everyone else should share it, but I'm not telling anyone. Of course, GDPR is coming in here as well, so there will be data breach reporting. But no, we don't go into the level of technical detail, but it's much more about some of the big things that we as a government can help spur on.
But it is. I think it's a really valid question, in that the security you get from just user ID or mail address and password is not very good.
This is the scariest single area of cybersecurity when you actually get down to it. Because what this is about, it's about identity management and it's about who you are. And when you look at a user ID and password, the idea is that it gives you a black and white answer. Now, it's possible that that can be compromised, but assuming for a minute that it's not, yeah, this is something that you know that identifies you, that nobody else knows. It should be, it was intended to be a black and white answer to who this person is. When you look at the real world, and that's because cybersecurity is not particularly mature in your technology, because, hey, it's all new. When you look at the real world, how do you know that I should be sat here talking to you and I haven't just come out from the, just been pulled in off the street by the ladies on the reception desk? Well, the answer is because Tim says so when he's chaired the panel. But how does Tim really know who I am? Because Tim thinks I work for a company called Willis Towers Watson. He knows that because it's on my LinkedIn profile, because we've run into each other numerous times over the years, because he has a fair idea who I am. But he doesn't absolutely know. He can't prove it. To prove it, he'd have to go and get the payroll records and verify them, and then check the company's controls are adequate to make sure they only have legitimate employees on the payroll. If you want absolute proof, we're not going to have it anymore. And this is the key of identity management. It's about how well do you know somebody, and how well can you make that decision. And one of the things we're going to have to accept is that that won't always be 100% accurate. And the other thing we're going to have to accept is that it's really easy to manage passwords. Anyone here works on a service desk, they're going to jump up and say, that's not the case, it's the biggest nightmare I have. But actually, really, passwords are really, really easy and straightforward. When I look at all the judgments I make in order to make sure that Stephanie is Stephanie when I meet her, I'm looking at all sorts of different factors. It's all happening behind the scenes. It's all seamless, and I don't notice, but that's because we've had millennia to design human beings. We haven't had millennia to design cybersecurity, we've had decades. And of most of that, it's really only a decade ago people started saying, hold on, passwords don't work, this isn't good enough. The next step was, well, maybe there should be 2 passwords, but different types. It's 2-factor authentication, something you know, something you have, or something you know, something you are. And I suspect what will slowly happen is we'll reduce our reliance on passwords, because we'll move from a 2-factor authentication, which is a password plus something, to 2 something I am, and something I have. And that will mature over time to recognition that there is no perfect solution here, and then we will start looking at much more complex ways of identifying people. And your computer will be looking at what you do, how fast you type, when you log on, all sorts, hundreds of different factors in order to work out whether you're actually who you're saying you are. Now, the really interesting question is, there are a whole load of companies out there doing great things in this space, but it's going to take decades, if not centuries, to design the right answer. The question for me is, okay, is there a role that Jersey can play here in actually helping to support the development of some of these companies and some of those ideas? And I think that's where it becomes a really interesting island-wide issue.
So I was going to say, actually, 10 years is not going to be something we can do, because PSD2 is basically saying it needs to happen now. And they've decided that SMS will not be a good factor for the second factor.
Well, SMS is already deprecated. That's been made very, very clear. But it's different. Regulators can go and say you must do things now, but it's like a regulator saying you must encrypt everything now. That doesn't make it any more viable. So we actually have to make things viable. That's R&D, that's development, that's people, intelligent people doing clever things, and there's a lot more of that to do.
We've got someone in the audience who has some solutions to this. Ricky, do you want to?
Yeah, Tim, thanks.
You want to say anything?
Windows 10 has Hello built in, and I'm sure some people have heard of it, others probably haven't enabled it. But Windows Hello is already built in, and you could easily just use your biometric capabilities to log into Windows right now today. Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Apple have all announced that within 3 years they will eliminate the password. If that happens or not, that's up to them. But Google already have contextual-based password analysis. How you use your phone, how you carry it in your pocket, it's all there. So they just want the users to adopt it, and they're waiting for the users to adopt it. There's a lot of people trying to sell additional technologies to this, but it's not required. It's built in. So contextual authentication exists. It's in Windows Hello. Xbox actually has even a better authentication mechanism if you want that. So I think we're there. We just need to adopt those technologies.
Thanks. Teo, do you see any adoption of the companies that you work for, and new technologies coming out? Do you see companies adopting more than username and password?
Oh yeah, definitely. So especially in Nordic countries, it's mobile ID that's really becoming dominant.
Mobile,
ID,
and what is that?
well, that's something that's integrated into your SIM card, basically.
Okay.
So in Nordic countries, for instance, not a lot of people use prepaid phones, so most of them have a contract. So they've been identified by the telco operator when they've signed the contract for the connection. So so basically that's where the first identifications be done, and then after that's SIM card is used as the second factor when authenticating.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to ask a question in the panel?
Jersey, being an island amongst the Channel Islands, has traditionally in the old world view been fairly physically defensible. It's surrounded by a sea, it's quite easy to actually build forts, and indeed there are throwbacks to this defence dotted around the island across the centuries. I'd like the panel's view on whether or not this insular nature provides any degree of additional opportunity or protection in the cyber world, and whether or not the history of Jersey being isolated is actually affecting our perception of security and what security means in this new electronic generation.
Great question, Rob. Thank you. Yes. And I'm waiting for someone to catch my eye, and Andy was the first.
I mean, so historically, as you say, we're surrounded by water, so if we were going to be attacked, they'd have to cross that water. Fortunately, these days with data transmission, although you can talk about your internet service providers being as the first line of defence, really, they should be doing everything they can do to protect data on the island. From what I've experienced in the last 6-8 months I've been over here working on the project, the internet service providers have various, some are very helpful and some are very stubborn. I'm not going to mention any names, but as it is...
Also bear in mind we're kindly sponsored by one today.
As I say, I'm not mentioning any names at all.
Some that are more
As was previously touched upon, trust and honesty are the two big keys to this, and we should be able to trust our internet service providers to keep our data protected, but we should also trust them to do everything they can do in a proactive, I believe, in a proactive way to prevent any kind of loss of data. They are the main routes in and out for data on the island, so really we have to, a large part of the buck stops with them. We have been chatting to them. As I say, some have been very helpful, and we're still trying to build up that trust with the other internet service providers to get them to assist, really, because a lot of them saying we don't have a problem. We never have any cyber attacks on the island, which, well, let's face it, it isn't true. But getting anybody to admit they've got a problem is the hardest part. It's like, I suppose, like an alcoholic. You've got to get them to admit they've got a problem, but they're just not holding their hands up and saying, there's any kind of problem on the island. Until we can get past that stage, we're going to have difficulties. So we're just really trying to get whatever force we can behind the project and behind using government to get them to actually help as much as they possibly can, not as much as they want to.
So, probably a simple question, but one of our larger telcos is state-owned,
It is.
and you're writing a policy for the states. Can we influence that?
I'll take it back a bit and say that we can influence. We have a number of ways we influence. As you say, we own one of them. I would say, having now been working on this project for 2 years and leading the development cybersecurity strategy in Jersey 2 years, where we were 2 years ago in terms of working cooperatively, not just with the telcos, but with the rest of the critical national infrastructure and with business, and where we are now, is streets away. The partnerships that we're building, talking to these people, the conversations we're having now are very, very different and much more collaborative. and much more encouraging, because this isn't an issue that just for us, it's an issue for them. It's a commercial issue for them. Selling yourself as a safe ISP provider in telco is a huge commercial opportunity. So I think the relationships there, and a huge part of the strategy is about those partnerships and how we develop and how we work together. The question this gentleman asked about us being an island, and I think hinting at the fact there are only a few ways in and out that data can come in, is interesting too. A number of approaches that people are taking are more hardcore. We can control every entrance if we want to, so we have to look at what the advantages we have as an island are, and build something that helps build on those. I would say that, having talked to a lot of people about some of these sort of great firewall approaches, that there is a risk if you do a sort of armadillo approach where you think that you're totally secure. Actually, you can be quite vulnerable in places because there's no such thing as total security, even on an island.
Theo, do you have a Nordic view on that? Because there's some islands down.
Yeah, well, I think the government and network operators, they cooperate really closely, and they try to keep the networks really clean, actually. So that's one of the ways they try to attract digital businesses to countries like Finland, and that requires a lot of efforts from the network operators as well. And then when it comes to ring fencing and firewall sort of thing, I don't think they planned anything like that there. So if you want to attract businesses and if you want to keep the place kind of safe place to run digital business, everything is about regulations and laws. You need to have those in place. You need to have privacy, and you need to have really clear legislation that it's not kind of ambiguous for the businesses, and that's really the basis.
Okay. Matt,
The answer to your question is no. Well, so the first half of the question, you had 2 bits to your question: is it an opportunity, and does it influence our perspectives? The answer to the first half of the question, which to me is the interesting bit, is no. I'd like it to be yes. I've spent a couple of years thinking about it and talking to people, hoping the answer might turn out to be yes, because it would be a really easy way for Jersey to capitalise on a strong cybersecurity posture, but it's just not the case. Building a giant wall is a strategy of the past anyway. Having a limited number of egress points is one way to protect your security, but it's only one way to protect your security. And there are ways to protect your security just as effectively if you have millions of ingress and egress points. So we could take one approach, someone else would take the other approach. That wouldn't give us a competitive advantage. It would just give us a different answer. I think what does give us a competitive advantage is if we can build the capabilities up from the inside. We can make sure that our companies are more secure, that our approach is more secure, that we have the right protections around our data, that our regulations are better, our laws are better. And we build it up so that overall you create a perception of a secure island as a place that's consistently good to do business in. That's what we did with Trust Space previously, but I'm afraid we're an island, that gives us a sort of geographic opportunity for cyber, and the answer is no. The second question, I did speak shortly after the Mossack Fonseca breach to somebody who was running a similar company in the Channel Islands, who pointed out to me that this was not going to happen to them because it didn't happen in Jersey. I'm afraid it does influence our perspectives. It probably always will. We shouldn't be surprised that if we live on an island we can be a bit insular. It just means it's something that we've got to fight, and it comes back to the education and the culture and the leadership actually that the States of Jersey can show in explaining that that's not the way that we need to work in the modern world.
One comment I have on that, I can't remember where it was, but in the last couple of weeks I heard somebody from the Jersey Financial Services Commission say that they themselves have many thousands of such attacks a week.
Attempted,
Yes.
4,000.
Well, that's right, attempted. Is to put a scale on this, are they unusual, or are we talking about everybody of any size on the island having that degree of attacks per week?
It does sound low. I wouldn't be surprised if I get that number of attempted attacks on my domestic router, quite honestly, given the number of automated attacks that take place out there. I mean, certainly as a large corporate, we would get a substantial number of attempts. However, the number that carry a risk of being successful should be a handful. Those are the ones you need to worry about, which is why the key is monitoring and detection, and if the worst comes to worst, being able to respond. There's definitely nothing unusual about the statistics that they're providing there. What it does show is that if all you're trying to do is defend against that, then somewhere, something, somehow is going to get through and you're going to have a problem. So it validates the approach to security that was taken in the past.
So you're more concerned about the quality of the attacks rather than the quantity?
Oh yes, definitely.
There's an interesting stat on this that we were talking to a customer based out of Guernsey today, this morning. They have 14,800 events per second. That means there's no events. Correlation is 0.5%. That's per second. So 66 million an hour. Okay, and that's 0.5% are actually security incidents, and 4% of those 0.5s are actually breaches. Gives you an idea. And they're in Guernsey.
So, thanks, Rob. That was a good question, and I just, from what Matt's saying, it's just reminded me of this is a true story. And with my BNP Paribas hat on, we were looking for a service provider to do a particular. I want to be deliberately vague, to do a particular function, and they operated. It was almost a cloud type service, and when I talked to them about their security and just very early questions about security, I said, how secure are you, what you do? You don't have to worry about that. We host in Guernsey, it's an island, it's secure. Needless to say, I ran in reverse as quickly as I could. One of the questions I had for the panel, which is, I think is related to that, is that a couple of weeks ago, the country of Liberia suffered an internet outage. And at the time, it was said to be an Internet of Things DDoS attack. And I was talking to Paul Duffett from Roger Carlis earlier, and he said that the word on the security street is that it might not be someone might have got a DNS setting wrong. But that started me thinking, well, Liberia's only got one internet connection. We haven't got many as an island, and we must be a great, almost a honeypot as a place to go and try and do a DDoS connection. Wouldn't it be great if you're a hacker and you could just knock off Jersey or put them out of action for a while? It would be great publicity for those people. And I was wondering, what can we do as an island to try and prevent that and secure us?
Very little. I'll explain why. That's probably a slightly controversial view, but DDoS attacks are pretty unique. So there's absolutely nothing new about DDoS attacks, which is just a denial of service by sending loads of data your way from lots of different places. Essentially, it means gaining control of lots of different places to send the data from, and then chucking it at you. Loads of different ways in which you can mitigate this. As a company, you can try and run DDoS prevention measures at your telco. You can try and run them within your own environment. There are lots of different techniques you can do. You can filter your data. You can manage your bandwidth very effectively. Lots of different things that you can do to reduce this. If it happens, there are things that you can do about it, which most of them are temporary. They're all temporary. But they can do a lot of damage when they're happening. There's absolutely nothing new about these at all, but they've got a little boring over recent years because they've become a bit predictable, and what's changing is very much the IoT bit. If you have a whole load of computers that are not particularly secure and you want to secure them, you can do stuff with it, like update the software, run additional security tools on them, run enterprise-grade security tools on them, constrain them, lock them down, and isolate them within your network. If you have a connected fridge, the only person who's updating that is the supplier of the fridge, and the chance of them doing that anytime soon is pretty slim. And the reason for that is quite simple. Your connected fridge, toaster, home video camera, whatever else it happens to be, will work just fine for you, even if it's being used as part of a botnet or something to carry out a DDoS attack. It'll also work just fine if you're the retailer. When you're retailing these, when you're selling these things, if you're the manufacturer, your customer's not answering all that many questions about the risk of the toaster being used in a denial of service attack on Jersey. They're asking questions about how long it takes to heat their toast, or whether they're going to have to bin it in 6 months, or whether it's going to last for 2 years. Whether it looks nice, or whether it costs more than $14.99. So neither the supplier nor the customer have a massive incentive here to provide the level of security that we need. And security suppliers don't have the same techniques at their disposal, same access to operating systems and devices that they do if you're talking about a computer, a laptop, an iPad, a piece of network equipment, or whatever else it happens to be. So it adds up to a very big externality. It's very difficult to work out how we address this. We have to accept that for some period.
What you're talking about, though, is where the attack originates from.
Yeah.
If we accept that the attacks are always going to happen from wherever, what can we, Jersey, do to stop those attacks coming here or to deflect them
So
to another location?
This is my point. There may be some things that you can do potentially to deflect or reduce, but you can't stop them from coming here. You will not be able to stop them from coming here. And generally speaking, all the evidence is that no matter what defences you've put in place for DDoS attacks, somebody will find a bigger capability to attack you. You look at the likes of Cloudflare and the sort of volumes that they see. Putting that sort of volume of protection in front of Jersey would be totally implausible. So you can't prevent at that level. So you have to go back to the source and say, why is this happening? It's because of this. Why is this a raised risk now? It's because of this IoT issue. So how do we deal with that? And I hate to say it, but a small island like us is going to struggle. An individual company is going to find it impossible. It is an externality, and it does require some form of government involvement and intervention to make sure that we have good security standards at the point where these things are designed and made, in the same way that you wouldn't allow people to produce electrical equipment without asking it to meet safety standards, or allow people to account for an organisation in whatever way they wanted without regard to international standards. And we do that in this space, and we allow people to do whatever they want, and that's what we need to stop.
So still trying to get a sneak peek into more of the security
You
policy.
won't, I mean,
So does it cover the protection of those sort of attacks?
it looks, we talk about the Internet of Things because obviously that's, the world is changing, you know, the Internet of Things is a big factor in this. I think that where Matt is right, we are a small jurisdiction, we cannot on our own influence the standards of how these things are made, you know, internationally. One of the things there are two things we need to do. The first is we need to be operating the highest possible regulations as we are with GDPR. We need to do that. We need to work internationally with the rest of the world and make sure that we can influence and talk and understand and grow that way. And the other thing is, we don't need to focus, I think I mentioned this earlier, just on prevention. We need to focus on when it goes wrong, how do we respond? And then taking those together helps to minimise the risk. I think to date, we've benefited a little bit. We've talked about the numbers of attacks. We've benefited a little bit through security from obscurity, and we can't rely on that going forward. You know, there will be a time when our heads is above the parapet and we become a particularly attractive target, and so we need to be ready for that.
You and Matt.
So is it sheer luck that this hasn't happened so
Yeah,
far?
potentially, yeah. I
Well,
mean, yeah.
But who would like to do that for Jersey anyway? I'm just asking. Like, who would like to flood those pipes coming here just to
There
cut?
tends to be a political reason why these
Yes.
things are done,
Yeah.
and you know, so there's a, you know, if you're a particular company or a particular political organisation, you tend to be more attractive to those kinds of attacks than if you are just going about your business quietly. But if, for example, there was a very big, I don't know, tax-related scandal about Jersey or something like that, that might be the sort of occasion where we would become a little bit more appealing to that kind of troublemaker.
Both yourself and Matt have rightly referred to the fact that Jersey is limited size and limited resources. But Andy, my understanding of the Sincere project is that the Crown dependencies and some other locations are working together to pool their resources. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So there's two sorts of sides to that. There's the law enforcement side, which is where they're trying to pool their resources. Unfortunately, it's not seen as a major priority amongst the police forces. We're trying to use the project to raise awareness to the hierarchy themselves, to say you need some more investment in training, because at the moment the private sector millions of pounds into training, R&D, to get the best cyber protection and to be able to investigate incidents. At the moment, that's not the same in the public sector, in the police force. So we're trying to increase awareness of the problem to the senior ranks. But one of the other, on sort of the general population side of things, you've got obviously large companies over in Jersey, but you've actually got some small, some SME companies over here. And we've been trying to ask ourselves what can be done to improve the cybersecurity amongst those companies. And in the UK, there's a certification scheme called Cyber Essentials, and that's which we're going to start to see if we can push that on the island. And for £100, it basically is you self-certify, you go through what basics you've got on your network and on your web pages, etc. And you will then be able to have a logo on your web page, so you know this local firm is doing everything it can do to protect the data it stores about yourself. So it's really just another sort of practice we're trying to get running over here at the moment on that level. So we've obviously got the large-scale corporations, we've got the general public, and there's a lot of small companies over here we need to look at protecting as well.
And the self-assessment thing, what's the size of organisation would you envisage that to be up to?
It's from your man on his own up to, say, 50 people, where they have got some kind of IT management within the company. But it's not, there's not millions of pounds being pumped into IT security.
So
Cyber Essentials is better for small companies
Yes.
because it's simpler. If you are running a server, you don't want Cyber Essentials.
No.
You want something bigger.
yes.
It's one of a number of models that are used in the UK. They're pushing it overseas. It's quite interesting for a number of reasons for us, because it helps people talk you through from very little, from zero to a much higher level.
Yeah.
It also in the UK, it has very helpfully, when something does go wrong and there's some insurance and a helpline to call, which for your one-man or five-man band might be very helpful.
Teo, you work with lots of companies and companies over here. Do you have a view about Cyber Essentials?
Yeah, sounds very good. Although it's not kind of what I've seen, firms are trying to get competitive advantage by having cybersecurity well organized. And if you want to signal that out to your customers, self-assessment is not enough. So you have to do a bit more, to be honest.
What would the next step be on? What's the next stage after doing that?
Well, there are certain certifications. For instance, quite popular seems to be on the island right now, one called ISO 27001, but there are also others, and they are always third party giving you the certification, and you need to invest quite a lot to get one. But it's also the idea behind it, so you should be able to stand out from the crowd if you've actually invested to get the cybersecurity in order.
Okay, I think there was a question. Yes.
I have a question. I was talking to a company from Eastern Europe which was trying to sell cybersecurity on the island. And one of the things I realized when talking to them, that people in the boardroom don't realize their liability to the data. So I think that there is a need to educate somehow. And what are we doing toward that? I think it's great to educate the people at the level of how to protect yourself, but I don't think people in companies understand that it's not the responsibility of technology, the CTO or CIO making sure that there is a wall. When the data is out, it's actually you in the board who's going to be.
I agree with your point. But do you think that, just out of interest, is that an issue just with the boards in Jersey? Or?
No, I think it is not only Jersey, it's universal. But I think that Jersey is in a special place in that we're dealing with financial data. And that financial data, when used, so data is money, and
Yeah.
people forget that. And so in the wrong hand, and with now with the ability to really, with AI to be able to create more stuff, you now have a liability to this. And I don't think these individuals understand that they get the jail card, not the CIO.
Yep.
So the investments, making sure the right investments are there.
So I'd actually like to ask Matt for your view, because you're working in within a company, how do you ensure that security is discussed at board level, that you get the right funding, and that the directors understand what their liability is?
I have no problem getting board attention to this issue at the moment. Absolutely no problem getting board attention. If anything, the contrary.
Why is
Yeah.
that?
Because the very high profile this issue has, the extreme sort of focus that it has from regulators, the lack of understanding that it has, the lack of knowledge in this space, our own limitations as a profession in terms of how we're able to communicate security risks. The inability to accurately quantify security risks is absolutely key, makes it very, very difficult for organisations to know how to respond when you don't know how big the risk actually is that your organisation is exposed to. The complexity of messages, the sheer volume of, snake oil salesmen and so on there are out there in security, in the same way there are many legitimate, excellent and legitimate vendors. And it's very difficult to separate these messages across because there's very limited understanding. Buying security products, buying security services is actually quite hard. They're inherently complicated. It is difficult. This is not an easy problem for boards at all. It's really very, very hard. And they struggle to find the right questions, and security professionals struggle to find the right answers. And I think it will take us some time to get there. What we have done, I think, in terms of the board, is making clear it's around what you report. So lots of people report things like what percentage of your systems have antivirus up to date. I mean, you're more than welcome to do that if you want to do, but if it's 99.9% and what you're saying is that there's a computer out there somewhere that can compromise your whole network, the message that you receive as a security professional and that the board receives is completely different. That sort of stuff's relatively limited value for most boards, so you tend to be looking at what's the maturity of my security controls, where are the key issues, what are the areas we need to improve, how do we compare to the rest of the world, recognising they're not necessarily where they want to be either. How do we map against incoming requirements or legislation, and just being practical and hands-on about what the gaps are is much more valuable. But actually a lot of the messaging comes from the ground up. So if you're trying to explain a board financial risk, then they understood financial risk since they were first given pocket money by their parents. That's not the case with these sorts of risks. Even if you spent your whole life using technology, it's only in the last 10 years it's really hit the headlines and people have been thinking about it. So you have to educate the whole workforce. What we did last year, we introduced a whole new cyber awareness program that we've invested significantly in to reach all our employees, which involves cartoons, videos, interactive games, and all sorts of different methods to get that message across. We've invented our own character, Harry the Hacker, linked in with cybercrime, and taken our employees on a whole journey about how these threats have matured, as well as about how they need to respond. And that was actually sufficiently successful that one of members of our team over in the US actually turned up one day dressed as our cartoon character that we had created. And we now use him to front our videos. So I think getting the message across is about culture rather than information is key. But actually, if you're looking at it from a board perspective, I mean, the question that I'd ask anybody who's responsible for running a company right now is, 10 years ago, everybody understood that the main asset you had as a company was a financial asset, it was your money. I think now increasingly, particularly in the types of business that we operate, in the sort of sectors that we have in the Channel Islands, you have two assets. You have your financial resources and you have your information. And it is very hard to work out which one of those is more valuable. Probably your information is more risky. So if you would put a whole ecosystem around controlling your financial risks, of a whole finance team to manage it, monitoring monthly board reports, all the rest of it to make sure you're looking after your financial assets, then why on earth would you not do the same for your information?
We are almost out of time, and I would just like to ask each of the panel members one question, with a very short answer, please. Because we have the Internet of Things eagerly chomping at the bit to take on the stage. And my question is, going back to the original title of this, cybersecurity, do you believe it's a threat or an opportunity for Jersey? And if it's an opportunity, what might that be?
Both. Do you want me to go on?
Yes, yes.
I'll very briefly.
Yes.
It's a threat for everybody. It's a threat for every individual, it's a threat for every business, it's a threat for the jurisdiction, but we're not alone. It's an opportunity because we've talked at the data protection session earlier today, at the cybersecurity session today, and we'll keep talking about it. Trust. And trust is hugely, I think trust is the central word for this. And we are a jurisdiction which is trusted. We need to maintain that reputation and build on it, and cybersecurity and data protection are two of the ways we can do that.
Thank you. Theo?
Well, what can I say more? I mean, yeah, definitely opportunity if the, let's say, basis is working and you've got regulations in place and awareness in place and so forth, you can most likely attract new businesses here. Whereas if you don't do anything, well, it's just threat.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's both, but the interesting bit's the opportunity. I think it is an opportunity not to build a giant wall around the island, but instead to look at the seeing Jersey as an incubator for great cybersecurity businesses, organisations who have new ideas. One of the things that we have is we have reduced scale, but the same set of problems that any large company has. So that makes a fantastic place potentially for small companies, innovative companies, to come and try and solve complex problems. If we could capitalise on that, build relationships with larger jurisdictions like the City of London and that are also on our doorstep, then maybe we can capitalise on the opportunity here and also some of the geopolitical trends that are around us. I think that'd be really interesting.
Thank you. Andy?
There's not a lot left to add, really, but other the fact that the scale, really, the fact that the island is so small, and if you want to reach someone, there's one person, a phone number, as opposed to a large organisation, you've got to get through the switchboard and 1,000 people to find who you want to talk to. Over here, it's a lot easier.
Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for being with us and giving us some great questions today. I'm conscious that there's been some hands go up and we haven't been able to take any questions, so please tackle the panel before they leave the building. They're quite friendly. But I'd like to thank Stephanie, Theo, Matt and Andy for taking the time out to join us today. And thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.